Hello viewers, today for the initial checking out of, we have a set of AT&T Cordless the telephones. This is the AT&T model EL51209. And it uses the AC power going into it again. The AC 6 volts at 300 milliamps. It was manufactured in the infamous China, but fortunately it seems to still be working. The AC to AC adapters are the model number. Oh, I can hardly read that. The model U06 003 0A12V. And it takes in 117 volts, which is kind of an oddity, and it outputs 6 volts. The same kind of current. I did a video on a similar set to this a couple months ago. It was the set that had the answering machine. There was a local pizza restaurant around here, used to be around here, that had these phones. I really can't remember now if it was the answering machine model or not. I'm pretty certain it was the answering machine model. Anyways, I remember seeing these phones at that restaurant. Had a lot of good memories at that restaurant. It was there for a number of years and then it just closed up. I don't know why. It always seemed to do a tremendous business. The food was really good. It was a total dive, and as is the case, typically the case with those kind of restaurants, the food was really good. I used to go there a lot. When I was in high school, I'd go there with my friends and we'd get pizza, and I remember hearing these phones ring. They also had a trimline phone that they used, and they had a ringer. I actually think that it was something like this, probably the same one. And so they had the 3 phones, and I remember the phones would always be ringing quite a bit in there. They really did a lot of business. Anyway, so this is the phone that they had there. I wanted to get one of these for years, but I just haven't been able to find one until more recently. It's kind of an interesting looking handset. The screen is kind of neat because it kind of resembles like a CRT kind of screen or an early LCD computer screen. The buttons are all plastic. There's no belt clip or headset jack. Now, a lot of these AT&T and VTech phones from the time were really more or less the same thing. You know, the operating system is all the same, and the button layouts are, and then they have different physical buttons, but a lot of them probably even use the same circuit boards because they were just so similar. So I suspect, like all the other ones, this was probably a decent phone. Got to set the date and time. It is it's 5/4. Whoops. And it's 22. I don't know what the time is, so we'll just say it's, whoops, we'll just say it's 4:20. Okay. This era of the VTech and AT&T phones seemed to be the last era that had the kind of distorted ringer at the highest volume. It's got a very distinct sound to it when you put the ring up all the way. Oh, this one wasn't on the default ring. See, it's very clear sounding. And it kind of distorts to a very distinct sound. I remember hearing that everywhere back in the day. Alright, so let's begin by calling these phones. I need a second here to turn the equipment on. I should have turned it on before I started the recording. But, you know, whatever. Some things never change. Okay, here we go. Looks like they both rang at about the same time. Caller ID came in okay. Screens have pretty good contrast on these. Even from behind the camera I can still read the screen okay. That's enough for that. There's no answering machine, so we're not going to get anywhere. The paging is kind of quiet. I think it's a function of the ringer volume, which is not ideal. It's a bit too quiet. Okay, let's go to the outside line and we'll make some calls here. Make a call to the testing phone line. And let's see what kind of audio quality we have here.
In a mountain street is my idea of a good time.
After the dance, they went straight home. The hostess taught the new maid to serve.
Adding fast leads to wrong sums. The show was a flop from the very start.
There was water in the cellar after the heavy rain. They're not listed in the new phone book.
A large size in stockings is hard to sell. The juice of lemons makes fine punch.
Smoke poured out of every crack. Serve the hot rum to the tired heroes.
Those words were the cue for the actor to leave. A yacht slid around the point into the bay.
The place seems dull and quite stupid. Thieves who rob friends deserve jail.
The frosty air passed through the coat. The crooked maze failed to fool the mouse.
He wrote the last novel there at the inn. Even the worst will beat his low score.
So the speakerphone kind of operates the same way as the ringer volume does. The fullest or the highest volume setting does give a fair bit more volume, but it kind of gets distorted and you lose a lot of clarity. Let's see how the ear thing sounds.
The sun came up to light the eastern sky.
The two met while playing on the sand. The ink stain dried on the finished page.
The ripe taste of cheese improves with age. Act on these orders with great speed.
Okay, I'll up the volume now.
Very start.
The cement had dried when he moved it. The loss of the second ship was hard to take.
March the soldiers past the next hill. A cup of sugar makes sweet fudge.
He broke his tie.
This sounds pretty good.
Shaky floor. It takes heat to bring out the odor.
Oh, what a rancid odor. There must be a skunk nearby.
The lease ran out in 16 weeks.
The purple tie was 10 years old.
Alright, this one seems to be working just fine as well. Okay, now I'll record some testing messages.
3, new messages and 5 old messages. Message 1.
This is the first testing message from AT&T DECT telephone model EL51209. I kind of like these phones and a lot of the other earlier AT&T DECT phones. They seem to have pretty good range. They dial very quickly. The audio pickup is pretty good. And the sound quality is reasonable. One anomaly about these phones is that I've never really been able to find any kind of documentation that claims what the battery life is supposed to be, which is a feature that's pretty heavily advertised both on Uniden phones and on Panasonic's phones. Okay, I'm all the way across the room now, so if it's still getting a good clear signal, then it is working fine. Okay, I'm going to go back into the studio now. The battery life, not per charge talk time, but overall longevity before it's got to get replaced, seems to be pretty decent on these phones, as well as in the newer phones, AT&T or VTech phones. They seem to hold up just fine for quite a while. Okay, now I'll switch it to the speakerphone. Okay, it's on the speakerphone now, and I'm speaking at about the same volume and distance as I was before. So this will give a good comparison of the change in volume and pickup quality on speakerphone versus the phone mode. I don't know if this was heard on the video a few minutes ago, but it sounds to me like there's a kind of an odd higher frequency, almost like a staticky kind of sound in the earpiece, and it fluctuates every couple of seconds, like pulsates. It's a bit distracting, although I suppose in most environments where there's some background noise and or you're listening to somebody speak through the telephone, it probably would not be noticeable. Okay, so I'm going to put the phone down on the table. Telephone is now on the table, and I'm speaking about a foot over the telephone. I'm going to start moving away from the telephone now. Now I'm about 2 feet away from the telephone, and this is 3 feet away from the telephone. And this is now about 4 feet away from the telephone. I'd like the speakerphone to be working properly, well, from this distance. Good, clear pickup, decent volume modulation. Move back further, 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet, 11 feet, all the way across the room. Okay, now we'll return back to the telephone. Okay, I'm back to the telephone now, and I'm going to hang up this telephone into the base.
Message 2.
It seemed to cut off. I think perhaps the message reached the 4 minutes duration that it's limited to. So I don't believe the hang-up sound was the heard. So this message I will hang up into the base, and then the next message I'll record from the second handset, and I will hang up using the button.
Message 3.
This is a test of the second handset on the speakerphone with the speakerphone buttons backlit illuminating. Now the illumination has ceased as the phone has been switched over to phone mode. This time I will hang up with the infamous off button.
End of messages.
That sounded pretty good. The audio had decent modulation to it. The levels was pretty consistent. It was clear. And the speakerphone worked quite well as also. And remember that I was speaking pretty quietly during the test, so that the performance would be as poor as you could expect. So if you was speaking louder, of course the speakerphone would pick up even clearer. I was surprised at how well it picked up from all the way across the room. Not many phones seem to do that. Anyways, that'll be it for these telephones. These AT&T, or Advanced American telephones. They work pretty well. And it's a neat set.